Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Vital Art session. I am your teacher, Kelly Folsom, and I'm super excited today for our lesson. I hope everybody is having a great start to the summer. For those of us in the States, I hope that you had a wonderful, happy 4th of July. And so I thought this would be such a fun lesson to kick off, the heat of July summer with some fresh watermelon. I've never painted watermelon before, and I thought this would be just a heck of a lot of fun to give it a shot. So we've got one that's turned over on its side with the stripes, one that's cut showing the red, and this is a beautiful, one of my favorite new props from France, this confit jar. And so my idea here was to have everything kind of in these neutrals and shades of green, and then so that the red little wedge watermelon really pops from all of that. So when you're setting up a still life, make sure that you're thinking about, what it is that you want to really pop more than the other things in the painting, and you can set that up in terms of your value structure or in terms of color, in this case where everything in the painting is in neutrals or in shades of green, so the only thing that's red is really going to stand out. So let's dive in and get started. Welcome back. I'm just getting this started with a really nice tone with my Merige and some burnt umber. I do want this background to be kind of warm, even though it is a lighter value. And in general, in oil painting, you go from warm to cool, thin and transparent to thick, and dark to light. So you want to make sure you start off your tone with something relatively neutral, so that you don't have, really, and also transparent, I should say. So you don't have a really bold color or a really thick color to have to overcome as you work the painting. All right, so then I just use a paper towel there just to kind of dab that a little bit drier so that my surface is not too wet. That's going to help wet paint be able to stick on top a little bit better, and also make that paint underneath not quite mix in so much with my brush strokes. So make sure you're not painting on too wet of a tone. Then I like to find my center with those diagonals. I like to find my thirds so that I can get an idea of how much space I'm dealing with here. Now I will say I did kind of contemplate, should this go vertical or should this go horizontal? And I think it really could go either way, or even on a square, just with the nature of the setup. But I think I'm going to go I decided horizontal here. I'm going to put in the table edge a little bit lower than my thirds. My main object is going to be here on this middle third, and I'm just going to make it about a third high. I'm going to follow this angle over to where the watermelon wedge is back here. So these are really just kind of envelope shaped lines, so that I can get my size and placement in, albeit quickly, but what's the word I'm looking for? Appropriately, or although it's quick, it is precise, really, in the fact that I'm leaving enough room to breathe around my objects. So I know that I'm not just filling out the entire canvas with the objects. So those thirds really help me figure that out, get my bearings. I'm going to use some more burnt umber down here for the shadow of the table edge. I'm also just going to use some more burnt umber, more thickly applied this time, for the shadow that's in the background back here. While I'm there, I'm just going to get that curve of the wedge. This wedge might be a little bit big, or long rather, so I'm going to get a little bit of this value and in the background, because really there's shadow back there, and then the wedge has a lot of that light green color on it. So after you tone, then you want to do your size and placement, which is what I did here without a lot of precise drawing. Don't take a lot of time. Just get the basic proportions and shapes in. So I love the height of this jar, and I'm going to put in the shadow shape now on the jar, which is a curve, you know, this kind of round curved shape. Again, just using burnt umber right now. Then the underplane of the jar has a shadow underneath it, and then a cast shadow that curves at an angle with the shape of the jar. So you want to get those form shadow shapes in. Don't worry about the exact color or value right now. Just get the shapes down. And then we've got the shadow here for the little handle. And then of course we'll have the spout on this side that, you know, we don't really need to draw right now. It'll come in once we put in background color and get to the local color. Now I do want to make sure that I just anchor everything down with cast shadows. So I'm going to come through and just get all of this anchored with a line of cast shadow. Even if it's too bulky right now, it's okay. Don't get too precise at this stage. Simple, simple, and big. All right, now I can get a little more precise on my wedge here in front of the jar. So I'm just going to wipe away any of that burnt umber. Get the shape of it. It's a really beautiful triangle shape. And then I will switch to a smaller brush for the cast shadow underneath and just finding that. I use all filberts, by the way, pretty much all the time. This is the shadow side of that wedge. Okay, and you do want to indicate that. You want to be have it really clear before you go into color what is in light and what is in shadow. Just because color can really fool us, and to get more believability in your painting, you really want to you know, really delineate what is light, what is shadow, because we paint them quite differently. Then I just threw in this little napkin, this white napkin, because I thought, well, we needed something like a neutral light, even though the background does have a lot of light in it. And then of course we do have our highlights. I'll just wipe away that wet tone, you know, to indicate that. But I guess I also liked this repetition of this triangle shape here, so I added this into the composition. And it also kind of accentuates the table edge, since we're doing a eye level perspective here with a table edge. And in those cases, it's really good if you can emphasize the table edge, because it'll just give more depth of space to your picture. More three-dimensional depth. All right, now I'm going to get some color in for that background, but I don't need just a lot. But I'm going to do some raw umber, which is nice and neutral, some of my yellow ochre, and then some white. I'm going to loosen that up, get it a little thinner since it's in the background. Actually, we'll just kind of mix it in with this stuff. Let's see how that looks. This might be a good place to judge it. I did want this color to be relatively neutral. Now you can bend it warmer to the yellow, you can bend it greener if you want to, but I don't think I want to put too much green in it, because, you know, my confit jar and the watermelon rind on the one on the left is green. I'll just kind of push all this out of my brush actually. And we're going to get rid of all these little diagram lines grid lines that we started off with. And then what you can do as well is, as you, let's say, come down closer to the shadow line, you can, you know, go a little bit darker. And here's another thought. If your raw umber is going too green, do raw umber and burnt umber together, because the burnt umber is really red and warm, and sometimes the raw umber with the yellow will go really green. But if you mix the two together, they'll go quite neutral for you. So sometimes that burnt umber is too red, and but mixing it with raw umber will give you a really nice soothing neutral. And I think with all the color on our subject matter, on our jar, and here's what I was talking about, just getting the drawing of that spout, or starting the drawing of that spout by using the paint around it. Don't worry about going over any of these edges or painting over an edge of an object, because you know, you kind of want some of this color. You want to lose some of these edges. And you might think, Kelly, but you spent all that time drawing that. Well, I didn't spend too much time. And also in painting, it's so much nicer if your edges can be more integrated and overlap. And in fact, you could go ahead and put some of this into the background edge, and you can just restate that, right, really quickly. You can restate that, and it's going to look so much better than just trying to paint around it. You know, that's kind of where paintings start looking too tight. I'm going to use some of this to go on the tabletop plane as well. So your background color, it's got to show up in other places in your painting. Again, that's part of integration. You can't have any one thing that is too totally separate from everything else in the painting. All right, let's just kind of scrape that up. I'll save that color because that's going to be a great neutralizing color if I should need to neutralize anything. Let's go straight in for this confit jar. Oh no, you know what? Let's just do some Cad Red Light right away, knowing that, you know, this is going to need a little something extra, but I just want to see that color there. That was the whole, you know, sort of idea for this painting. And then I don't use spirits, so I just wipe my brush. And again, if a little bit of that red gets in there, that is okay, because we need color integration. But I just wipe my brush, and since I don't use spirits, my brush is not wet, so that Cad Red is not going to impact or influence. So I love this color, and we're going to use it a lot in this painting, which is Phthalo Green, Cool or Deep. This one's from Sennelier. If you don't have the Phthalo Green, you can just use Phthalo Blue, but I'm going to use that with the Yellow Ochre. Yeah, there's quite a bit of yellow in this pot versus, say, the deeper blue greens that are on the watermelon wedge colors. So be sure to check when you have very similar colors running throughout the painting. Compare your mixtures to one another. You know, ask yourself: is this green a little more yellow? Is it a little more blue? Is it dull or is it brilliant, you know, so that you can get the right green mixture, and in the end you don't wind up with all of your greens looking just the same. And I like to look right here on the biggest part and the most lit up part. Obviously you're going to have transitions and gradations in this color, and you just want to get all this on there. Okay, we've got some up here. I have so much paint on my brush that I can make so many brush strokes, you know, and then I know that I picked up some of that brown there on that side, so I'll just flip my brush the other way, and I still have clean paint on the side of this bristle over here. Some of that just comes with time, you know, and then once I have that too dirtied up, I'll just wipe it off. So some of this brush mastery just comes with a lot of time and practice. And then to instantly start creating form, I can start with that highlight in the center. And since the paint is so wet, and we have a short time for our demo here, I'll just use a palette knife so that I can get that wet paint to stick on top of the wet. Or what you can do also is just let that paint set up a little bit, and then you can use the brush to apply the highlight. But you have to get, if you're going to use the brush, you have to get a nice dollop of that paint just on the very tip. And as I said, this is probably not going to work because the paint is just too wet. Too wet and buttery. All right, let's start to darken this a little bit and also, neutralize. So how can I neutralize? I can use background color. How can I darken? I can just add in more of the colors we were using, the green and the ochre. And you know, hey, we need to neutralize, and we've got that watermelon there. Let's throw in a little cad red. So as we trail down to this region, which I call below the equator line, and then on the right hand side as well, that part of the form is getting less light since my light source is coming from over here on the left hand side. Now that's too big of a jump. I need like an in-between color. So let me go back to this green stuff, more pure green, and the yellows, less white. It's really important you get this part of the form looking really, really lit up. So more white paint has to come into the equation, and more thicker paint, more pure color there. And then we transition down, you know, darker and perhaps warmer, really just more neutral. Now then this little foot sticks back out and starts catching the light again. So, but you have to make that gradation pretty seamless so that people don't pick up on what you did. They don't notice what you did, and everything just feels right. So we could go even darker here, right at the base, and then let's just I kind of want to get this a little bit whiter, but that might take a little adjusting. So we'll just move forward. But I could make this pot even more, you know, very round and voluptuous, which is so lovely. Now, because this little spout and the handle are smaller forms, those are actually going to be a little bit darker, you know, because they're not as big of a form as here, so they're not going to reflect as much light. So you can go for a little darker green there. What you're going to have to make sure happens is that this edge, this curve, is overlapping in front of that spout. Okay, because even though the spout is connected from this angle where we're at, now we get a little more voluptuousness, which is nice. From this angle where we're at, we really want to get that sense that this is overlapping in front. Okay. And it's tricky to do that at this stage because I really have to make sure that leading edge, the starting edge, the lit edge, stays nice and clean. You know, and doesn't get too muddied up with this background color. So you've really got to keep adding paint on top, keep working that to make sure that that stays nice and clean. All right, let's get some shadow color for the underplane. I'm just going to do the phthalo and the cab red light. Those are complements in this case, and in this case I think it's really going to work. Complements don't always work for shadow colors, but in this case I think this is really going to work out. So complements don't always work because sometimes the object is too light in value. Sometimes actually, let's do the red oxide with the green to get a really dark neutral for some of these cast shadows underneath. So sometimes complements do not work. I rarely actually use complements for my shadow colors, so this may not be a great first example for new members, but you know, there are times where it will work, and so if it does work, go for it. But I know, for example, artists like Helen Van Wyck and other artists throughout the years have really promoted this, only ever use complements for your shadow colors. And honestly, it just doesn't work, you know, on everything. It does work on some things, but it won't work on everything. All right, so just getting in some of those shadows on that, and then the lighter green. I'm gonna have to switch brushes. I didn't clean this brush or shape this brush well after cleaning it. So the bristles are flaying out because I didn't shape it properly when I conditioned it. So if that's happening, if you've got a tool that, something like that happened, then you need to switch tools. You don't want to keep painting. All right, I've already got this yellow-green from up here. I'm going to just slap it on here. Slap it on. Because there is like that little green rind in between the white and the red. Right? So it's going to be so much easier for me to put the green in first and then put the white just straight. I'm just going to use straight white on top for this rind. And then we're going to just kind of mix it, layer wet into wet here to transition better into that red of the, I keep wanting to say cantaloupe, watermelon. All right. So now we're going to get a little bit more of this on there. I am going to use a little bit of Naples yellow light and some white here. We're going to just solidify this shape a little cleaner looking. Now, because this is a cut wedge, you are going to have a very abrupt plane change there. So you want those edges to be sharp enough and strong, And here's part of the thing about being painterly is that you have to use good paint. So if you're not using a lot of paint and you're trying to establish those sharp edges, your objects might look really, really cut out looking, But if you're making a bold brush stroke and you're laying down that paint nice and clean there, you will get this more painterly look by doing so. And part of that comes into play because I didn't, draw this whole thing perfectly and then fill in the lines. That's part of being painterly too. All right. And also, for example, just to show you, you can use whatever color is surrounding to kind of clean up the edge as well. But I do like to make sure that the overlapping edge really has an overlapping edge in front of the object that's back behind. So if you carve out and it weakens that edge, then you'll have to re-hit that edge like I just did with some fresh paint. I hope that is making sense. And then if we add too much white, we'll lose a little bit of that intensity of color. So I just went back in with Cab Red Light and really made sure that I got that intensity back. So there's a lot of layering in how I paint. And then alizarin crimson and Cab Red. Actually, we need more alizarin crimson. And look, we've got this green. Throw that green in there, right? That's going to give us that neutralization. We need the shadow plane here. Try to make it in as few as brush strokes as you can, if possible, to keep the paint really fresh. One thing about this is that, about this little wedge, is that I do wish there was like more little seeds. Maybe we can, this one's actually light, but maybe we can make it dark. I think that's more fun. I don't know, when I picture, I don't know about you guys, but when I picture a watermelon seed, I always think of black seeds. It's actually kind of hard now to get a watermelon with seeds. Everybody wants seedless. Now I've kind of got this background color stuff with the green that I think is going to work quite well, maybe, for shadow on white. We don't want shadow on white to go too brown, and we also kind of don't want it to have too much color, so there we go. I just need something kind of neutral there. This is where the viewer is going to get their information about what the local color is on that object. Wow, now we are getting into like this really tiny, tiny land down here. I may actually have to use like a much smaller brush. All right, so the underplane that is in cast shadow, I'm just going to use that straight phthalo green cool, comes up in this sort of triangle shape here. Fantastic. I don't really need to add anything else to it, really. Why not just use this color straight? Sometimes I think people just overcomplicate everything. You know, it's like, oh, we don't need to overcomplicate that. That works. Now there's a little glow passing through, just like a grape. So I'm going to use some more straight cad red. Let's see if that will get a little hint of that glow passing through, since watermelon is a little translucent when it's cut. I think that does the trick. Now we also need cast shadow on the, let's use that green with this background color. That's going to give us a nice neutral color for cast shadow. As probably all of the members will tell you also, this is also another kind of first. I don't use a lot of soft-haired brushes. This is just a Dick Blick Master Stroke number 4. I think it's just some kind of synthetic, but this is getting to be such a tiny little space here now that I think we need it. So cast shadow on white. And then I'm seeing that this is also part of why it's good to err on the side of caution of making things smaller, because as you paint, things begin to grow. So it's always nice if you make things a little bit smaller. I'm going to clean off some of this umber for my nice crisp white that's going to go there. And also this umber, I'm going to make this napkin a little bit bigger. Now I feel like it just needs to be a little more predominant here in this painting. Kind of wishing now I hadn't had it exactly symmetrical with that, but that's all right. We are just going to go with it. There is a little underplane shadow on this napkin. I'm going to use this green color with a heck of a lot more white, and that's going to be my shadow color. But this shadow is so much darker because it's from the watermelon blocking so much light, whereas this shadow color is lighter because we're getting a lot of light passing through the top of the napkin. And then this napkin just needs to be straight white. Again, no reason to overcomplicate matters. And then we need to get to those really fun, funky stripes. So just straight white. Again, make sure that your overlapping edges are nice and crisp and clean. Your edge of the white where it meets the shadow is crisp and clean. And you can only make so many brush strokes before you run out of paint. So, you know, you can't get everything perfect the first pass, nor do you want to, in my opinion. There's a little bit of peekaboo of light. I just wipe my brush in between here, and I think that little peekaboo of light is going to be nice because it really carves out the back edge of the watermelon as it's sitting on the top plane. Now, I lost a little bit of that in between shadow. Let's bring back in some of that green. That's nice. Might want to flatten that out. We don't. Depends on, you know, do you like big dollops? You know, if you do, go for it. Sometimes they can cast a shadow on your actual painting. So, all right. So basically just getting, you know, napkins, leaves, things like that. You've got to get the edges crisp and clean enough. While I'm here and got this white on my brush, I want to get a sense of reflected light in the underplane. So this is where mixing color on your surface is a really great idea. And now I'm seeing also that maybe this went a little too yellow. So I'm going to add back in some pure white, just mixing in with what I already have down. Yay! So fussing with those little transitions you can fuss with those for quite a while, but I want to show you these stripes, you know, an easy way to approach these stripes. Before I do that, I want to get some more of this reflected light into the underplane If you have a bold white cloth like that, it's really, it's really important to let that light really swim out. And you can just mix straight white, I can also add in some of the green or some of the yellow as well, if I want it to go a little bit cooler. And maybe that just kind of escapes over into that form shadow. You can, to blend this stuff a little bit more, you do have to have that darker color down though if you want it to look like a reflection. Otherwise it'll just look, kind of too light. To blend it a little bit or smooth that transition, you can use a palette knife or like a soft hair brush later on. Okay, now to get to those stripes, I'm going to do the lighter green first. I'm going to go to my Cad Lemon. Just going to mix right into this green pile here. And the phthalo green, cool. Maybe it needs to be a touch warmer, so a touch of the Cad Yellow Deep. That's nice. Kind of like a granny apple green. And what you can do is just jump your eye from here to here. This is a much more high intensity color green, whereas this one's a softer color green. I like to make sure that I cross hatch with my brush strokes so that I don't just have brush strokes going all one direction. And you also can change up the mixture a little bit. It's kind of bland and boring if you just mix up one color and then just fill it out, so you want some chaos, you want some imperfection, you don't want everything to be uniform. And then I kind of wish I hadn't flattened that out with the palette knife, but I can bring back a little. Sometimes if you get the paint too smooth, it just starts losing something. So actually, I kind of lost a little bit of that green over here. So let's use this brush and let's get back some of that green. Sometimes painting wet into wet, that just kind of happens. You paint over something, or the brush can both put paint down and it can also pull paint off. So sometimes you did something once and then you accidentally painted over it or got rid of it. All right, we need cast shadow under this. So this curves a little bit here as it's going back in space. And then I want to get an idea just for myself right quick. Where is that highlight going to be on this little wedge? And then to make the green color, we're just going to mix the phthalo green cool right into that lighter green mixture. And let's think this through because we kind of only get one shot at this. This is kind of like the middle color. There's even like a deeper green. But you want to curve this stripe with the curve of the watermelon. That's going to be our lightest one because it's where the highlight is. And then we get another curve here. Now you notice all these stripes are kind of blended in together. They're, so like this, sometimes you don't see as much of the brighter yellow green underneath. Sometimes there's more of the deeper green. Then I'm going to wipe my brush. We're going to go a little bit darker for our final stripe down here. I'm going to leave this more of the yellow green, even though there is another dark stripe. I just think that lighter color is going to read better against the background. Now you can do this to get your drawing, but then come back over top. Don't leave these flat cut out lines. It doesn't look natural. So come back sort of vertically and also curved, but you can do it to get your initial placement of that stripe.